This is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
What happens when spirits in the fallen realm disagree with one another over their plan of attack against God Most High? Welcome to A View from the Bunker. That'll be one of the things we'll discuss tonight. And as a regular series now of programs that's become more popular than what I had been doing, and I'm sure it has everything to do with the guests who are part of this program, and not me, your intrepid host. Joining us for our regular kind of a rotating round table of guests for a series that we are now calling Iron and Myth. First, Doug Van Dorn, who's the author of several books we recommend, Giant Sons of the Gods, Conspiracy Theory, and most recently co-author of Angel of the Lord, a biblical, historical, and theological study. He's the pastor of the Reformed Baptist Church of Northern Colorado in Boulder. You'll find him online, DouglasVanDorn.com. Another author, best-selling author and award-winning screenwriter, Brian Godawa. He's the author of the fiction series Chronicles of the Nephilim, Chronicles of the Watchers, Chronicles of the Apocalypse, and also a bunch of nonfiction that supports the research in his fiction. When Giants Were Upon the Earth, When Watchers Ruled the Nations, God Against the Gods, and many others. You find him online at Godawa.com. And Dr. Judd Burton joining us again tonight, and we're glad that he's here. We'll let him explain why. He's the director of the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, author of Interview with the Giant, Ethno-Historical Notes on the Nephilim, and you'll find him online at burtonbeyond.com and TIOBA, the Institute of Biblical Anthropology.org. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Well, first things first, I want to jump to Judd, because you've had kind of an adventure these last couple of weeks, brother. We're just thankful that you're here with us tonight. What's been going on? How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm in the process of having my vitals taken right now, actually. But it's a brand new experience for me in podcasting.
Well, for me as well. And
yeah, of course.
As Josh Peck is happy to tell people, I've been doing this since the year he was born, so that's saying something.
Yeah, indeed. Well, yeah, I'm just here recovering and being taken good care of, and without going into all the gory details and everything, it's just been kind of an ordeal, which I can fill people in on, at some point. But God's good and really has been miraculous in terms of my healing and the people that He's had taking care of me.
Well, praise God, because I know a lot of people were concerned. In fact, the four of us here were the other three of us and Josh Peck, who would wanted to be here tonight, but he's dealing with health issue for his son Nathan, who's really had a tough road to hoe these last few years as well. But
right,
yeah, you kind of went into radio silence there for a bit, and we got concerned. So we're glad that whether it's from a hospital bed or wherever, that you're able to just raise your hand in the queue there and say, hey, I'm still here.
Yeah, I am too. I'm giving that all to God.
Well, we kind of,
but yeah, it was. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, I don't want to jump in there. Just it's the old radio habit. Whenever I hear dead air, I just feel compelled to jump in.
All right. Okay, you show over that. That's your job. You're a broadcaster. Of course, you're supposed to do that. Okay. And so yeah, I'm just doing well, healing up, and I certainly didn't mean to scare everybody like I did, but once everything sort of hit the ground running, there were some kind of quick decisions that needed to be made, and you get admitted to the hospital, and there's just a barrage of people in and out, and poking and prodding and all that kind of good stuff, and but I can tell you guys that I have really felt the hand of God at work in all of this. I mean, just in terms of my numbers and blood cultures and everything, and it's really been overwhelming in terms of how much love everybody's been putting out in prayer. And anybody that doesn't believe in the power of prayer or the presence of God, when you go through something like this, it really it really diminishes whatever residual doubt you would have had.
Amen.
Well, that's really what it's all about. I mean, we
So to quote quote the famous quote, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated.
well, we are grateful to hear that, and we had a brief exchange via Facebook Messenger the other night, and came up with a topic that I wanted to kick to you guys, Doug and Brian, as well as you, Judd. I mean, this is something that Sharon and I have been thinking about in our Bible study here the last few months. It's a topic we keep coming back to on the weekly video series we've been producing on the book of Revelation, and it's the nature of Satan. Who is he, and how did he change, at least in the perception, or at least in the way he's described in the Bible, which would be the perception that the Jews had of him through the time of the Christian era. And as a kind of a secondary question there, how might that have been influenced by conflict in the spirit realm? In other words, if we assume that the angels, for lack of a better term, I mean, I know that's really imprecise, but if the fallen angels are agents of free will, as they appear to be, we can perhaps make some guesses about the way they behave. We kind of touched on this in a previous program. They don't all agree with each other. They all agree that they want to knock God off his throne, but they don't agree with each other. So how might that conflict have shaped the development of Satan from Genesis to Revelation? And I want to throw that out there. Anybody who wants to take that ball and run with it. I know what I think, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
All right, I'm going to go first because I'm not the professional in this. I'm the pastor. So you guys get to spend all your time doing this for a living. And so you've got way more study behind it than I do. I just dabble. So here's what I want to put out. Because we had talked about this. I don't know if it was the one that Derek and Judd and I did last time, but something came up with regard to Isaiah 14. And who is that character there? It might have even been the one you were on, Brian, the first one.
Yeah.
I think we might have talked about that. So,
I think so.
Yeah.
And I know that at least a couple of you have different views on this, but I was looking into who is it that the Jews think was the guy that was in the garden. So as Christians, we have, especially John in Revelation, and John 12 and Revelation 12 and Revelation 20, where he's identifying the serpent and Satan and the devil. And I think that connection's pretty tight, that this would be the guy that we would call Satan. However, if you go back to the Jewish pseudepigrapha and writings of the Second Temple, they're calling him all kinds of things. So you have some identified him as Satan. You have sometimes Satan-El, which is kind of a take on that, a little bit different. You have a guy named Samael, who's sometimes identified as that guy. You have Azazel, who's sometimes identified as that guy. You have Gadriel,
Beliar,
devil,
and Belial and Beliar too.
And Belial as well. That's right. So that's a whole bunch of different characters. Some of them I think overlap, but some of them I don't think overlap. And so that means that there was questions among them in terms of who this guy was. So what I found interesting with that was that a couple of them, one of them is the Life of Adam and Eve, where they identify the character as the devil, and they actually allude to Isaiah 14. Saying that I will set my throne above the stars of heaven and be like the Most High. That's a direct quote from that. And in Charles Orr's pseudepigrapha, they actually, the scholar who did that particular book said that he traces that book to the 1st century AD. So that's an old idea, if he's right on that. The second one, this is in Second Enoch, which they also traced in that book to the first century. And in that one, they call him Satan-El, but they also are alluding to Isaiah 14. His throne is higher than the clouds which are above the earth, and hurled from the height, and that kind of stuff. So I think that there's at least some evidence that at least some of the Jews were identifying the character in Isaiah 14 with the character in the Garden of Eden. I don't know that that was universal, but at least we have some people that were doing that. So if that's the case, then, that's something I would like to get your take on first, is because you guys have said you kind of disagree with that take, because I think that influences, at least to some degree, what we're going to say about who this person is in the New Testament, where he came from, and all those kinds of things. So I'm still personally convinced that it's Satan that's in Isaiah 14, that he's the guy in the background behind the king of Babylon. But I really want to get your take, Derek, and Brian especially.
Judd too.
And me.
I've never talked to you, Judd, about this one. So yeah, if you've got a take on it, absolutely.
I will give input as I see fit.
Brian, you want to jump in?
Well, no, I'll gladly let you take over, Derek. It's fine.
Because
I'll jump in right before Judd.
Okay. Because you've said some things. You've written some things in your fiction that were new to me regarding what the Jews believe, Jewish pseudepigrapha, and the identity of, say, Gadrael and Mastema as.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you say that because. Like Doug was saying, well, I'm the pastor, so I'm the least researcher. Well, I'm the fiction writer, so I'm like the one who can't discern between
non-fiction writer.
But I'm like, I'm the one who's I'm the one who, like, when I mix up reality and fiction, and I lose track of which is which sometimes.
Yeah.
I admit that, So yeah, I have to sometimes go back to my Bible research stuff just to make sure what did I make up and what was I, Because, of course, for me, as a dramatist, as a storyteller, the story has to take priority, entertainment. And so I have to make things work within this sort of universe that I'm crafting. And I'm drawing from Second Temple literature as well as the Bible. And I want to be consistent with the Bible. But in the end, as we're already indicating here, there are multiple interpretations. And so you kind of have to pick one. And sometimes I have to go with the one that's the most interesting rather than the one I think is the most biblical, whatever. But yeah, they're just basically, Doug, I think that I was coming across the similar understanding that, as I looked through the Dead Sea Scrolls and Enoch and some of these other books, you get this, it can be confusing. And I certainly haven't done the detailed analysis of it. I was drawing from all these and realizing, there's sometimes there's a lot of overlapping of the names with Satan and Belial. Sometimes it's different. Yeah. Like there's one in Third Enoch. I've got it right here. Every day Satan sits with Samael, prince of Rome. Right. And it's like, but there's another passage where Samael is identified as Satan. So there's some confusion there, and there might be some way of addressing that, I suppose. But since I don't take Second Temple literature as canon, then I can draw from it, but it doesn't have to be, you can pick and choose probably in some ways, certainly for what fits my story. And what fits my story telling the most was the fact that by the time I got to the New Testament and to the time of Jesus, as much as there's a lot of problems with seeing seeing the individual that we all know in Christianity as Satan, right? As seeing him as the specific individual in the Old Testament texts. Like you said, I couldn't deny the fact that, there's that, two scriptures, and that's all there is in the New Testament that liken Satan to the ancient serpent, Nachash, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be there,
Yeah.
And so that's important. I guess we could talk about that. But what was interesting to me was what Derek was getting at, which is however you see him, and some have made the argument that there's a development of the Satan, the understanding of the Satan from Old Testament to New Testament by way of the Second Temple literature. And of course, people will cry out and say, well, that's liberalism, and that's saying, God wouldn't act that way. But then there's the other side, which is, but if you believe in progressive revelation, which is God doesn't reveal everything, and over time, as more scriptures get inscripturated, we learn more about God that we didn't know, that maybe there is an alteration of an understanding that's going on theologically that God wants us to embark in, So I'm open to that possibility. And so by the time we get in the New Testament, where we start to see the God of this world, which, Derek was talking about, earlier, was what does that mean? Because we've all had that watcher. We all agreed to the basic ancient watcher paradigm, which is that there are, the watchers over the nations and their spiritual, territorial, supernatural principalities, that kind of a thing. What that looks like, we all have different ideas of course. But since we all sort of support that, it's like, so we all see that. We see the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelieving. There's various New Testament scriptures that talk about that, the God of this world. And what does that mean? And we're probably all agreeing that that's Satan in some capacity, right? Mm-hmm. And how did it get there? I think there's a lot to talk about there. But, the idea there is, maybe I'm jumping ahead, you were talking about Isaiah 14.
I really want to know, who do you, like, did you pick one of these names and go with it for who you think is the one in Isaiah 14?
Yeah. So as a fiction writer, I had to commit to something, right? Because I'm actually dramatizing, and I'm putting it down in writing. Like, if you're writing a scholarly book, you can say, well, some passages say this, some passages say that. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. But when you're writing a story, you kind of have to commit. So what I committed to was that that I don't know that it's necessarily the absolute truth here, but that Satan was given these various names. So in my series, I do have an actual character who takes on these various names at various times, Mastema, etc., right, and Belial, and depending on the time period, right. But what I don't do, which I think most of you guys would probably agree with, is I actually don't make him the king of everyone until the New Testament. Mm-hmm. And so in my stories, Satan is a character, and he's a very powerful character, but he's not the chief. There are many different, Baal and etc. There are many characters in different nations. And like we said, if there are principalities over these various territories, well, then they are the powers that be, right? Not the Satan. And the argument will be, well, isn't Satan head of over all of them? My approach would be, no, he wasn't until ancient Rome. And that, the Second Temple literature does have suggestions that Satan, or these various names, was the watcher of Rome. That's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's in Enoch, that's in Martyrdom of Ascension of Isaiah, and several other texts. And so that seemed to make sense to me, because it worked well with the fact that if Rome is the worldwide power, and the principle of the watcher paradigm is that these, like we talked about, they're working together against Yahweh, but that doesn't mean they're not fighting against each other to have power over each other. Well, then it would be consistent with the Bible to make sense that if somehow Satan, what we refer to as Satan, I'm going to use that colloquially, I don't like the term, but that he becomes the watcher over Rome somehow in some point in time. And then when Rome takes over the world, because he's the watcher of Rome, he becomes the God of the world, and of course, in the context of the New Testament, I'm assuming we all understand that words like the world and all that wasn't the globe, it was the known world. And to them, they saw that as Rome. And yes, it could extend beyond Rome, but the basic language is talking about the Roman Empire and how that was the nations and all this. And so then that makes sense of the biblical passages that then say Satan is the God of this world type of thing, and that maintains the watcher paradigm. That it doesn't mean that he's the only one or that he's the chief overall, but certainly when they're writing at that point in time, he definitely was the chief, right? Now, you guys, take it beyond that, beyond the first century. I obviously don't, but you guys will take it beyond, and I'll let you describe how you see that. But that's the basic scenario that I was operating in for most of my stories. And I do believe that there's some truth to it theologically and such. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but does that help the conversation get going?
It does. What really got our attention was when we started digging into the parallel passages in Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, and seeing that in both of those passages, the rebel who's being described there has definite connections to the netherworld, especially when you look at Ezekiel 28 in the broader context of Ezekiel 27 through 32. There's a definite underworld connection to this entity. And I maybe go a little farther in suggesting that this entity is connected to the Assyrian, which is a position that Ryan Pitterson also holds. But the bottom line is, when you compare this to what you see of the character described or called the Satan in the Old Testament, he's still got access to the throne room of God. His main job is accusing the brethren, like in Job chapters 1 and 2 and in Zechariah chapter 4, where he's before the angel of Yahweh and accusing the high priest in the days of Zerubbabel, named Joshua. That's really the only two places where we know for sure that we're talking about this character, the accuser. The story of David sending out Joab to number the people of Israel. You don't have the definite article "the" in front of Satan, so it's not even clear that it's the same character. Not even clear that it's a supernatural adversary. It might have been a political rival who rose up, or it could have been God acting as an adversary, like the angel of the Lord in front of Balaam. Yep. Just saying, testing David to see where David's faith was. Are you going to trust in me, or are you going to, go out and see how many swords you can bring to the battlefield? And David failed that test.
In fact, isn't the parallel passage, doesn't it say that God was?
It's the Lord who does it, right?
Yeah,
that's a great point. I think a lot of people don't understand that sometimes the Lord himself is called the Satan, the accuser. So like the angel of the Lord with Balaam's story, the angel of the Lord becomes the Satan there. And people freak out because in their mind, all they can think of is the modern idea of Satan. And they're like, that's not possible.
Right.
And that's why, by the way, or the adversary is also a very strong, legitimate, because what does Jesus call Peter? Satan, right? Well, you're my adversary at this point. He's not calling him the incarnation of Satan. And it wouldn't make sense any other way, but it really does within this paradigm, which is why I do think that there's some good argumentation for pulling back a little bit on that the typical notion of Satan in the Bible and recognizing it. I'm not saying that because Jesus actually was tempted by Satan in the wilderness, so I believe there's that character who's real. Right. I'm just saying it's not as evident in the Old Testament, and the context is more the office of the accuser or the adversary rather than an individual. It might be an individual, but it's more the office. That's how I've come to see it. And for purpose of my fiction, it's a better, smoother story for me to make it the same character, so I do. Mm-hmm. But in my Bible research, it's like, there's it may not be necessarily,
So do you give a name or names to the character in Isaiah 14, Derek?
I think that's the character. Well, I think it's Shemiyaza.
Interesting. So he's the opponent, or he's kind of the cohort with Azazel in the fall, right? In Enoch, right?
And that's I realize it's speculative, but the verses in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, especially when you go far ahead to Ezekiel 32, it's clear that he's connected to the Rephaim. Isaiah 14:9 rouses the shades, the Rephaim, to greet you. There's the reference to the chiefs of the Giberim in Ezekiel 32. So you've got an underworld connection that doesn't exist for the Satan in the Old Testament. So we know that there were other rebels in Scripture. Peter and Jude make reference to them, the angels who sinned, who are chained in gloomy darkness. So who would this one most likely be? Now, again, speculation, but it's got to be an entity who's connected to the netherworld. When you read Ezekiel 32, you see that he's sent to the, even in Isaiah 14, verse 19, you were cast out away from your grave like a loathed branch. A scholar by the name of Christopher B. Hayes wrote a paper explaining that that phrase is a homonym. It's not the Hebrew word netzer, which means branch. It's the Egyptian word netzer, which is usually used in connection with the god Osiris. It means dead god. So you are a loathed, dead god, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit like a dead body trampled underfoot. So again, the netherworld connection, and when you get into Ezekiel 32, the character called the Assyrian, which excites some end times prophecy researchers, except when you look at all of those references to the Assyrian in the Old Testament, the definite article ha in Hebrew is never there. So the is missing. It's not the Assyrian, it's Ashur, which is either the nation Assyria, their capital city Ashur, or their chief deity Ashur, who was...
Which verse is that you're referring to?
In referring to Ashur?
Yeah. You know?
Well, yeah, it's Isaiah 14. He's in Isaiah 14, 24, and 25. But then you also see him in Ezekiel 32, beginning at verse 22. Ashur is there in all her company, its graves all around, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, whose graves are set in the uttermost parts of the pit. And I think Ezekiel and Isaiah are using some wordplay there, because that phrase, uttermost parts of the pit, Yarkate Bor, is in parallel in Isaiah 14, verses 13 through 15. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God, or the stars of El, if you want to take the Canaanite interpretation. I will set my throne on high. I will set on the mount of assembly, the Har Moed, in the far reaches of the north, Yarkate Zaphon, Mount Zaphon, the mountain where Baal's palace is located. He wants to set up his mount of assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High, but you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit, or the uttermost reaches of the pit, Yarkate Bor. You wanted Yarkate Zaphon, the mountain of the gods. No, you're going to go down to the uttermost parts of the pit. Now, speculation, but I'm arguing that that's a reference to Tartarus, the abyss, the bottomless pit. So, a scholar by the name of William Gallagher back in 94 wrote a paper where he translated the phrase that Origen and then Jerome translated Lucifer, Halel ben Shakar. Gallagher argues that Halel is what you get when you transliterate from Akkadian through Ugaritic to Hebrew, the name of Enlil, the chief deity of Mesopotamia. And Enlil was just the Akkadian Babylonian form of Ashur, the chief god of the Assyrians.
What are you thinking of all this, Judd?
Yeah, as I was about to say, as I'm listening to all this, and there's this stream of underworld mythology and Cathonism, and we're as we're starting to see Rome move into a place of authority, not just on the Italian peninsula, but in the Mediterranean world in general. A lot of this stuff, to my mind, goes back to the very beginning of some of the things that, like, Livy and the old antiquarians wrote about the origins of Rome and the founding of Rome. And of course, that brings us to the story of Romulus and Remus, who were, they fit this semi-divine being model, or Nephilim, however you want to classify it. Their divine father was Mars, who raped their mother, Rhea Silvia, who was one of the Vestal Virgins, while Rome was still a small monarchy. And this became the basis for the foundation of all of Rome's institutions, its religion, its politics, its maneuverings in the world that was up and coming. And right at the heart of that is the raising of these two gigantic beings, Romulus and Remus, brothers who end up quarreling over who would rule Rome, and it ended up in fratricide with Romulus killing Remus. And so right from the get-go, you've got these, because they're associated with caves, they're associated with the underworld, with the Cathonism, because of being raised by the she-wolf. That's where all the mementos and things like that on the Capitoline come from. And so I'm seeing this, this this is set up pretty early on, contiguously with, Derek, some of the allusions that you were making to these early monarchical Israelite periods. This is all broiling and coming to a head in Rome at that time. It all circles back to Romulus in particular, but Romulus and Remus and General Romulus is often acknowledged as Quirinius in a lot of ceremony. But suffice to say that there's a religious air, or religious sort of consciousness that this is occurring, pretty early on in Rome. That's the 8th century. We're talking about the foundations. Plenty of time for this entity, whatever appellation we want to give it. Arguably a Satan, the Satan, as Brian pointed out, the god of this world for that time. And what we're learning about the fluidity of that term, and you could do a whole study on just the plurality or the occurrence of plural renderings of words like shaitan and the Aramaic and Hebrew stuff. That gives you plenty of fodder to kind of flesh some of that out. But as you guys are talking about this, I'm thinking about the emergence of the Roman world, and how there's some definite overlap, some definite inroads and connections to be made.
I had one more specific question, Judd, with regard to Azazel, since Brian brought up his kind of his twin cohort in crime. I think that Azazel has some underworld connections too, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, if going back to some of my research and others, we're basically looking at the setup of the model for the god Pan. Azazel's dispatchment, in the apocryphal material, has him being thrown into a cave or a pit, Dudal, and right there you got that underworld establishment. And as all of us have pointed out in discussions before, caves are in world religions are regarded as entryways into the underworld, and it's stuff you can find all the world over throughout space and time. But yeah, there has to be some sort of chthonic connection there because of all not just the dispatchment of and interment of Azazel, but the cave imagery, the imagery that's preserved in the later goat gods like Bennu and Adzaka, and notably Pan because of the establishment of Peneus.
If I could toss this in too, like when I found out that Josephus, who's a very interesting ancient Jewish writer, he actually, at least he believed that in that cave of Pan that we're talking about, in Peneus, that he claims that there was a chasm that led down to the abyss, which I thought was like, wow, that's pretty fascinating, And of course, they blocked it off when we went to visit there. So maybe there is one there. I don't know.
Well, there are also these ancient accounts of people throwing cable. I mean, I've read the epigrams myself, and the French collection of the epigraphs that were recorded there, and I've seen it myself. People throwing cables in there to try and measure a depth, and they couldn't get one.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This is in that little, big cave, but it's got a little bit of water that's in it. I mean, even now.
We also have to remember that in the ancient world, before several earthquakes actually shut the back of it off.
Mm-hmm.
It was a different different kind of layout. You did have
was that earthquake in 70 AD, Brian?
Yeah. Actually, there was a lot of earthquakes, wasn't there?
It was the source of the source of the Jordan River.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, clearly there's something not typical about this cave. It's not a contrived monument like you find on the other kinds of the Timonor, or this sacred space there, or like the one you'd find that they have at the back of the Parthenon in Athens. I think that's where it is. Anyway, but yeah, there's clearly something unusual about this cave, just beyond it being we'll just worship Pan here, or how about that? If the headwaters of Jordan come out of this cave, yeah, there's clearly something otherworldly, netherworldly to it.
What's really intriguing is that this is at the base of Mount Hermon, which was the abode of El, creator god of the Canaanites, but his abode was described as at the source of the double deep?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The meeting of the double deep. So you've got, if I remember right, Edward Lipinski, the Belgian scholar who wrote that paper called El's Abode years ago, believed that it connected the underworld waters, the freshwater abyss below ground with the heavenly waters above. But there's another scholar whose paper I read not too long ago who suggested that the double deep might refer to the Sea of Galilee, which has some really interesting connotations, because that makes Jesus walking on the water and stilling the storm even that much more interesting.
Oh, yes. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
I could think that just let's kind of summarize the Isaiah stuff, and I could hear people thinking, all right, well, I've always thought that the guy in the garden is Satan, and didn't Dr. Heiser talk about Hillel ben Shakar being the shining one, right?
So Heiser has this great article, that I'm sure we've all read, where he actually argues that this, Isaiah is mocking the Babylonian king using the myth of Athtar, likening him, in the way that you, king, think you're a god, and here's this, and he uses the mythical language of Athtar. You're like this Athtar who tried to sit on the throne of Baal, and his feet were he was too small, that kind of thing, and so he's using the phonic language to connect him to that same phonic myth, absolutely. But it's the prophecy against the king of Babylon, and
sure.
And I'm not against. I don't like fight against the speculation that and this might be also referring to Satan. But I don't personally subscribe to it. But like I say, I'm not like against it. I just wish people would be more acknowledging of the fact that, okay, now here's what the text actually is about. And here's how we are extrapolating out from there, because there is that big difference. Because that otherwise, my big concern is that so many Christians are using prophecy, Old Testament prophecy, to mold it, to make it say whatever they want for now, and they're ignoring the original context.
Yes, and that's a tremendous historical crime. I mean, presentism does absolutely nothing for us in terms of clarifying the message.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I'm not arguing against it. I don't subscribe to it, but I'm actually still open to it, because I've also continued to heard the other arguments for, this is Satan and such. I'm like, okay, I see some merit in it. I definitely do. But my big thing too is the whole Lucifer thing, which now, Derek, you were in verse 12 of Isaiah 14. You were drawing in something a little bit different from what I've learned, but which is interesting to look more into. But that my understanding is that that's where the Christians get the misunderstanding of Lucifer as a name of Satan,
right?
Whereas Lucifer is actually the Latin word for Venus, the morning star.
Yeah.
And as we know, the stars were deified, and in the Bible they see them as deified. And it's interesting because Satan is called the morning star. And is this the only passage? I can't remember. Is there another one
where he's called it?
Yeah. Or is this the only one?
Yeah, I think this is the only one.
Oh, okay. So and then of course Jesus is called the morning star in Revelation. It's like, How can that be, right? Well, this is more talking about the divinized being, that some equate with Venus, the morning star, or the stars, etc. but Lucifer is not an actual name of a being,
Right.
And those are the kind of I think, what's the word? Not legends, but sort of Christian assumptions that I would like to at least try to disengage people from.
Yeah. And again, I see the reason that people connect Satan to this character in Isaiah 14, and I believe that Ezekiel 28 is the parallel chapter describing the same event. But if that's the case, then how do we reconcile a Nakash, which is a serpentine being, presumably, because that's what the word is usually translated in Hebrew, with the idea that the Ezekiel 28 describes him as a guardian cherub? And from Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10, we know this thing doesn't look anything like a snake. It's a four-headed winged bull thing. Yeah,
it's a great point, Derek. It really is. Different kind of a creature.
So now,
and I appreciate that our ability to be able to, we can bring up some of these things to challenge the assumptions and get people to go, now just, be a little open-minded and be aware of the fact that there are some good arguments on both sides, and here are. But it's interesting you bring that verse, because that's one where I've read other scholars who have pointed out that there's some real language problems with this in different translations, the Masoretic versus the Septuagint.
Right.
And sometimes the Septuagint's right, sometimes it's wrong, but you got to make the individual arguments. But this is one of those verses where it's actually in Septuagint, it's more you were with the anointed guardianship, which is why there's another school that argues this is actually talking about Adam and his fall and likening, again, verse 11 of Ezekiel 28. This would be my base level of understanding the prophecy, of which I know all you guys basically agree, and that is it's about the king of Tyre, and it's a historical prophecy, and he's likening to Adam falling in the garden type of thing. That's how I see it. Maybe you have it differently, but we acknowledge that, okay, whatever we're going to extrapolate or sort of speculate on, that's its primary meaning, is that historical prophecy, and then we go from there. And I know you guys agree with that.
Yeah, I think I would put it just that the prophecy itself is towards Tyre, and it's towards the king of Tyre.
Yeah,
just like in Isaiah, it's towards the king of Babylon, and that's who it's directed at. But I think the prophets are using some kind of mythological background in order to create a picture for the king of where he's come from and where he's going.
yeah, and Derek, that's why for me, like you mentioning all those underworld connections, that is the best argument to me that makes me consider, oh, well, maybe there's more than even what I'm seeing in it in that level. Now, of course, I see him as, using the underworld language and condemning the king and Tyre, condemning him to the underworld and all that kind of stuff. But because of all the research we've all done, it's like I can't deny that, there is this thread of underworld language and imagery that is beyond mere metaphor, that we all understand. And that's what makes me at least open to the fact that there maybe is more than beyond. It's beyond what I'm just seeing in that,
So I guess the next question would be, if we can't, and I recognize that my identification of this character who is in view in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 is speculative, but setting that aside, if we can agree that Satan of the New Testament, who Jesus in Matthew 12 says he's got a kingdom, how will he cast demons out by his own power? How will his kingdom stand? He's the God of this world. How does he get to that point from being the accuser or the adversary in the Old Testament? What happens to make that happen? What happens to these other rebels who were punished and sent down to Tartarus, according to Peter, that may have cleared the way for this guy?
Before we go down that, can I ask you guys what you think of? This is one of those things that I bring in from the Old Testament, and that is, and you mentioned this before, Derek, where the preposition "the" is used, and in the New Testament, it's also the Satan. And so I'm not, of course, I believe he's an individual being and demonic, but could it be that even in that capacity, it's referring to the adversary as a supernatural, spiritual, demonic principality of some kind, but it's not necessarily his name like we use it. And I'm not against using Satan because it's a good reference. But does that make sense? Like I'm just like, Christians, let's make sure that we're aware that there's more to this than just the Satan as a name. There's actually he's referred to as the adversary in Greek, and it is an individual being, but just be aware of that. Is that fair to bring that up or to even suggest that?
No, it absolutely has to be, in my opinion, because you just as with the Hebrew and the Aramaic stuff, you're looking at the linguistic, nuanced, idiomatic variations you're going to find in those words. So, to my mind, that's got to be part of the conversation.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it makes it hard to discuss things without using the well-known references that we all are used to using. So I often say Satan too, But it was funny because when I was writing my novels, I sought to incarnate that, this new understanding that it's an individual, but it's the Satan, little s. And I did that in my novels. And in order to try to at least just shake Christians to realize, there's a little bit different than how you may have understood it to be, But I guess I could have called him the adversary to be a direct translation, but yeah. So it's okay if you all refer to him as Satan
at all.
Yeah. I'm going to refer to him as Satan just for the sake of ease.
Certainly.
I think that's very fair, Brian. And that actually brings continuity between the two testaments to see it that way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So I'm still struggling with this because I clearly missed something here. So the definite article "the" is present in the Greek in the New Testament as well?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I just looked at about 5 or 6 of them, and every single one it was there. So I don't know if it's ever not there, but I haven't looked into that.
Well, I learned something. Okay, gonna have to change my next presentation.
Yeah, me too.
Iron and myth.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Iron, myth and iron, iron and myth.
Iron and myth.
Iron and myth. Doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
that's
like we've been talking about, as a believer in the New Testament, like if it weren't for the New Testament, I would have changed a lot of my understanding of Satan. But because of the fact that, he's depicted quite individually and, tempting Jesus and like Duggan mentioned, those 2 verses in Revelation, it seems so clear that, that there's this connection to the Nakash, and it's because of that I do maintain still the traditional view of him as an individual being of some kind, but I
know every once in a while there is a person that is called by the definite article. Remember when Donald Trump used to be the Donald?
Yeah. Which is not a good, yeah. Self-deifying there, huh? No.
I don't know.
But yeah.
I think so. Let's go. If we gonna move towards Derek's original question, Judd brought up how his mind went to Rome.
Yeah.
And Brian brought up the Prince of Rome, and that's where I go too. I think it's if you wanted to just call this person the Prince of Rome, to me that satisfies me quite well, because if you have like these different princes that are vying for power on kind of the earthly counterpart with their kingdoms, and at one point in time the Prince of Persia is the guy, another point in time the Prince of Egypt's the guy, or whatever, which is not Joseph.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden Rome rises to power and it's Prince of Rome. Now you've got this, you've got that worldview that's there. Now you try and identify who he is, and you recognize that sometimes he's called Satan because Samael is actually called Satan. But you could call him Samael if you wanted to. And it wouldn't hurt my theology in any way. And assuming that every reference in the New Testament would be the Satan, that would actually fit quite well into that as well.
Yeah, because it's the adversary. It's an individual being, but it's not necessarily a name. And so he could be named many things. Like the Essenes called him Belial or Beliar. So,
right.
Yeah.
I mean, some of these names, like I forget which one it is, means the poison of God. And so you hear this word and you're like, well, that's just a proper name. No, not really. Even that's a description. They're trying to tell you something about the character of the person. And so lots and lots of these names that they come up with that you read are telling you something about it. So, if you read the Watchers that give human beings knowledge and Enoch, so you have Kokabel or whatever, and well, what's that word? And, well, it's the guy who taught us the stars. I mean, well, that makes sense. So you name the god after that, right?
Yeah. But Derek, could you then? I feel like I kind of sidetracked it. So could you get us back on the track of what you were wanting to talk?
No, just and again, this is kind of speculative, but we clearly know that there are other fallen angels. There are other rebellious spirit beings, and if in the Old Testament he seems to still have access to the throne room of God, as he's accusing Job, he's accusing the high priest. No connection to the netherworld, but yet somehow we've got this idea that he is the Lord of Hell, and he's in the netherworld. Okay, we can set that aside, but we know that at least it appears that by the time of the first century, at least, those of us who are futurists believe he's still got a role to play yet as the leader of this rebellion. He appears to be the one in charge of it. Whether you said it in the first century or today, that it's the same situation according to John in Revelation. He seems to be the leader of this fallen angel coalition. How would his status have changed in the spirit realm if there are other fallen entities? I mean, presumably, if he's the Prince of Rome, and for example, from your historical research that in the time of Caesar Augustus in the first couple of centuries, Rome and Parthia, the Persian Empire, were going at it, hammer and tongs, fighting over Mesopotamia. Who is the Prince of Persia? And why did he lose? I mean, we see the prophecy of Daniel that the Prince of Greece was going to come and then take out the Prince of Persia. And if we connect this entity to the storm god, as Jesus appeared to do with his reference to Baal in Matthew 12 and to the great altar of Zeus, where Satan dwells in Pergamum in Revelation 2, then did the Satan or host Satanas adopt this identity and then just use it to move his base of operations away from the Levant to Greece and then Rome and now where?
Well, no, because now you're talking about the trajectory of Western civilization from that point.
Yes,
I mean look at our classical legacy. And I'm not talking about the one that's married to faith, like the Alcuin of York and the Irish monk. I'm not talking about when classical education and that became merged with faith, and that became an operative of enlightening Christians, who are going through the fledgling sort of higher education. I hesitate to call it a system, but there it is in the Dark Ages. But the trajectory was laid out by classical civilization, because in some way, shape, or form, as Europe and the West progressed, it took and reinvented or preserved somehow all of these Greco-Roman traditions, and this creates a kind of avenue for those things for the Satan's machinations to sort of flow through quite naturally, actually. Mm-hmm. Consider, for instance, in thaumaturgy and high magic, all of the ritual incantation that's been preserved in Latin. Latin is used widely in all kinds of ritual and high magic, and that's not by accident. That's by design. It's part of what I've been talking about over the years. And is speculative, to a point, but it's also historically demonstrable by things that would take us far beyond the time constraints of this show. But suffice to say that classical tradition became, and it spread in reinvention and recycling and whatnot. I used to tell my students, that Europe was made from the bones of old Rome, because everywhere you look in the projection of not just cities and geography, but just in terms of tradition and its influence, literature and art and everything in between, theology, philosophy. It creates this natural avenue for those things to not only travel, but in some cases become so naturalistic as to be innocuous on the surface. So the Satan of that era, yes, was able to take all of this and continue that world system, using emerging and expanding Western tradition to kind of send it on its way. And so as the church is growing, as the influence for unfortunately both good and ill, as it's growing, the underbelly of that is that you've got this smooth, slick avenue for all of Satan's, the god of this world, that emerges in the Roman world. You've got all of these clear avenues for it to move with some measure of ease, cultural ease. So that's kind of how I see that. Is if you examine just the general legacy of Greco-Romanism and classical tradition, it clearly illustrates, to my mind, how that could happen and perpetuate, and those plans be moved around to disparate parts of the world or what have you, because Western tradition became such a driving. I mean, it was the paradigm for the longest time. Like Jordan Peterson was saying, the Bible was once the book. I mean, it was every book printed after that was built on that model, and it sort of carried Western tradition. I'm talking about the printing history of it and literary tradition. But I think that you can't leave those classical avenues out of the discussion, because they're the ones by which all of this stuff is traveling.
We argued that you could make a case, we did make the case, or tried to, that that was the conquest of the rider on the white horse of Revelation. Mm-hmm. Conquering and to conquer. His conquest is Western civilization.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
Here's a thought I had while you guys were talking there. Plato has this really interesting statement in Critias, where he's talking about, he almost uses Moses' exact language from Deuteronomy 32, the allotment of the gods over the nations. I mean, it's really spooky, and led some early Christians to say that Plato came in somehow into contact with Judaism and Moses.
Yeah.
It's so identical. But he identifies the gods of Greece not with who you would think. Because if the high god of Greece is Zeus, you would think, oh, well, okay, Zeus was over Greece. But that's not what he says. He says it's Athena and Hephaestus. And he says these gods were given over to beauty and wisdom and all the stuff that he liked and whatever. And so those are the gods that are over Greece. And I kind of look at that as that's the equivalent of the 70. That would be the gods that would be from the 70 nations at that point. But then right after that, he starts talking about Zeus as the high god overall. And so it makes me wonder if there isn't some kind of a hierarchy going on with the way that, you have the 70 that are allotted, but somehow there's some dudes that are higher up than that are kind of controlling and moving things. So what if you have something like, you have some really powerful guys like this, to bring Brian's thing up in 3rd Enoch again, every day Satan sits with Samael, Prince of Rome, and with Dubiel, Prince of Persia. Okay, so you got a couple of names that they're giving to these guys, and so you're in the Middle East, and Persia's they're the kingdom that's ruling the world, and so this guy would be he'd be the guy. It wouldn't be Zeus at that point in time; it'd be Dubiel, somebody like that. But then, as the course of Greece comes in there and they conquer, well, somehow their gods are now getting mixed up and taking over the gods of the Assyrians or the Persians, whoever. And then when Rome does the same thing happens. And so I'm thinking of Baal's mountain up in the north in Syria, and they called it, what did they call it, Derek?
Zephon.
Sophon.
Sophon.
That's right. And then when the Greeks came in there, they renamed it, and they renamed it after Zeus. But the strange thing is, and you brought this up earlier, that Baal is the storm god and Zeus is the storm god. And so it's like, whether or not, I've thought about it for a long time that somehow Baal like expands his empire into Rome or something, but maybe it's not that. Maybe it's something different, that this general or whatever who's over kind of the divine council in some way has just had more power than the 70. Maybe somehow he's exerting power through different entities of these different nations and taking on the characteristics of somebody like that, so that you can very closely identify Baal and Zeus and Jupiter, and quite frankly, like you said, with the throne of Satan at Pergamum, which is very clearly referring to the altar of Zeus that they took out of there and put in I think it's in the Berlin Museum or something like that. Yeah. You can very closely identify these characters, so that it's not like Satan just comes out of nowhere in the New Testament. There's rich Old Testament background that I think very, very closely related to Baal. I'm not sure how, whether it's the same entity or not. There's a foe of the Old Testament, it's Baal in the supernatural world. There's a foe of the New Testament, it's the Satan, whatever we want to call him.
And Beelzebul.
Beelzebul, well, yeah, but then we kind of get into the other names, because you've got Paul calling him Beliar or Belial, whatever.
Yeah,
and, those kinds of things. So I just think it's important that people see that this character that we talk about is kind of the great foe of the world, What if he's just the Prince of Rome? And the reason why he was so important at that time is because Rome ruled the world. And if the New Testament would have been written 600 years earlier, it would have been the Prince of Persia. It would have been somebody totally different.
And that makes perfect sense to me, because it's logical, because if we are, believing in this scenario where these various, and it's actual scriptures where, there are these entities over, spiritual entities over earthly authorities. And then when there's war on earth, there's war in heaven, right? So, well, if there's a war that's won on earth, then why wouldn't there be the war in heaven won by these entities? And yeah, it makes the most amount of sense to me.
Me too.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now, the question comes. I'm the minority viewpoint here, and I'm not gonna fight. We're all pretty good and civil about this. But I actually want to ask you a question, because I truly want to hear how you address this. And I have an idea, but so my understanding is that Satan was the god of this world. That's the first century. The New Testament's written before the destruction of Jerusalem. And my understanding, the destruction of Jerusalem is the final earthly sort of culmination of the old covenant on earth, and the new covenant kingdom is brought in and fully established. Yeah, it is inaugurated with the death and resurrection and ascension of Christ, and then fully consummated within that generation. And that Jesus Christ's ascension, this is how I understand it, and I want to understand if you guys who project beyond that, how do you understand this? My understanding then is that Christ is Psalm 82, arise, O God, the resurrection, arise and inherit the nations. So when Jesus ascends to the throne, he becomes king of all the earth. That is, and the New Testament texts say, he drags them in triumph. The Roman triumph was dragging those deities through the streets and executing them. And there's the execution planned in Psalm 82 for the rebel watchers. And the New Testament seems to indicate to me that the ascension of Christ and the seated becoming king of the earth is the disinheritance of those earthly watchers, which, if the Gentile nations were under those, the eyes of the mind were darkened, right? The Gentiles were under those watchers. That's why the darkness ruled the world, and little Israel is the only one that had the light, right? But with Messiah's enthronement, they're disinherited. And they are judged at that point, and the kingdom of God, like Daniel, it comes into the world and it starts to grow to fill the earth. But But the main principle there is that Messiah is truly enthroned as king, and so he is king over all the nations now, and multiple scriptures that indicate that. I know you guys know that, but how then do you conceive? For me, I understand it that then, yeah, I mean, there's still evil, there's still demons, I guess, maybe there's still spiritual evil, and we've talked about this before. There's great evil in the world, and we should fight it. I don't believe there's a mark of the beast. The chip in the hand is the mark of the beast, but I believe it's tyrannical evil. So understanding that, yeah, now that's what allows the gospel to be able to draw people from every tongue and tribe and nation, is that they are no longer under the watchers, under their authority. And so there can't be spiritual authorities now that the new gospel kingdom and Jesus is king over all the earth. So that doesn't mean there's not evil, obviously, and all that. But how do you guys understand it then past that new covenant into the present? You know I'm getting at. Like, do you believe that there are these entities that are in power over the nations? And if so, how can that be in light of the gospel and Messiah? Is that a good, fair question?
Very fair question.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
For another episode.
Fair enough, but I mean, yeah.
Actually, yeah. Given the time we spent on this one, but that is a sub one that we'll have to tangle with at some length.
Yeah,
I would like to see us talk about that for a good long program. I really would. I think it's a very important question.
Yeah.
I do too.
And by the way, I think that there are cognitive dissonances in both of our views.
Uh-huh.
So I think it's worthy of a discussion. But yeah.
Oh.
Well, that'll be the subject
Absolutely.
for the next discussion, the next episode of Iron and Myth. We'll talk about how can all things be in subjection.
And I know all the listeners are like, no. Well, some are like, yes.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, glad that one's over.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great question, though. How can everything be in subjection under his feet if we're still seeing evil in this world? Is it all due to us as humans, or are we still being influenced by principalities and powers? I mean, if they're in subject to Jesus, why is it that we're still wrestling with principalities and powers? So we can, do a little research and come back for the next episode, because you're right. This is something that we can't do justice to in just a few minutes, but interesting though. Wow. Well, like I said, I learned something new today. There I was, just a few weeks ago talking about the missing "the" in the Old Testament, and lo and behold, we got extra "thes" in the New Testament now, which I'm going to get to revise and cut for the future episode.
The Article War.
Article War.
We
Article
laugh,
Man. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's use it as the challenge, because I mean, it's a genuine question. None of us we're not here to fight against each other or in our disagreements. I truly, genuinely I've wanted to interact with your viewpoint on this precise topic for a while in a genuine way, and you guys are the guys who can do it. And that's why I bring it up. I don't get into fights on the internet and stuff like that, or disagreements, debates. But I honestly want to hear how you understand that, and to understand your view better,
Likewise.
Brian, I want you to know that I didn't mean that to be dismissive. I really think that this is deserving of a much longer conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when Judd and I were originally talking about could we get something bigger with maybe 5 or 6 of us to talk about this is exactly what I wanted. And I think it's what people hunger for. They don't just necessarily need canned kind of shows. I mean, they want to see real interaction with people who disagree with things, and how can we disagree and still be Christians together and act the way we're supposed to, and also sharpen each other, which kind of become the name of the show. So,
amen.
I think
Amen.
it's exactly the purpose of why I wanted to be part of this, because, I mean, that's what's so great to me. I'm not sticking in my circle by having this show. I mean, I got guys who've got all kinds of different views, but we are able to talk about a commonality that we all share, but we have very different takes on it. And I think the church needs a lot more interaction like this.
Amen.
I agree with you. And to be honest, I've been gun shy about bringing it up with most people. I'm not afraid with you guys because all of you, I know Judd the least, but both of you guys have shown eminent, noble acceptance of my divergent views. Derek's had me on his show 100 times,
Yeah.
and we find, and he's been very gracious, and we do seek what we have in common.
Right.
But because you've displayed that, I think that I definitely enjoy going beyond the common and having good, hearty talks and debates. But there's few people in today's world that I trust to do that because it's so hostile out there,
Yeah.
But I don't have that with you guys, and that's why I'm willing to go forward on that.
I appreciate
Well,
that.
Again, just alluding to what Doug said. I mean, that's the whole reason behind why we conceptualize this roundtable. We need more of this because it's the speculation. It was like Doug is fond of saying. At the end of the day, we all have bad theology. I mean, we're all looking through the glass darkly at this stuff, and we're bringing talents and abilities and training that God's given us, and so, but there's no reason to eviscerate one another for differences in opinion. No, we're supposed to be united under Christ's banner.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, fascinating discussion, and I look forward to the next one. And that's going to be really interesting because I love the way you put that. We've all got bad theology at the end of the day. When we're all at the marriage supper of the Lamb, or whatever that looks like, and Jesus says, "Okay, anyone here who got the theology 100% correct, raise your hand." Oh, wait, that would be me. So,
Exactly.
All right. Iron and Myth, Doug Van Dorn, Brian Godawa, Dr. Judd Burton. Thank you, gentlemen. This was a joy. We'll do this again very, very soon. We were really glad that we were able to get Judd Burton back on the program this week. Well, he didn't miss last month, but in between last month and this month, as you heard, some health issues that complicated things a bit. But from his hospital room, what a trooper. We plan to continue doing these Iron and Myth programs once a month or as our schedules allow, because all of us are very curious about these subjects, a lot of speculation, but hopefully somewhat informed speculation. We hope that you get something out of it as well. Check the show notes, VFTB.net, or wherever you are consuming this podcast, which is, of course, wherever fine podcasts are sold. And you'll find links to the websites for Judd Burton, Doug Van Dorn, and Brian Godawa. Coming up, we talked to Aaron Lipkin about the exciting discovery of the curse tablet, the lead amulet found at the site of Joshua's altar, and some exciting news about what Sharon and I have in the works, some changes ahead for the material, the content coming out of Gilbert House. That is ahead as A View from the Bunker continues. Driving the internet to think every Sunday night from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You'll find us online at VFTB.net. On YouTube, of course, click the link, share, subscribe subscribe and then share. Subscribe first, and make sure you click the little deedly bob to get notified every time we post something new to YouTube. You'll also find us on Twitter at View from Bunker, my personal Twitter handle at Derek Gilbert. On Facebook, our View from the Bunker page, and of course Gab, MeWe, Getter, and Parler at Derek P. Gilbert. This week we had the opportunity to talk to one of the principals involved in the discovery of that lead curse tablet, which the experts say has been dated to the 14th, 13th centuries BC. The oldest known inscription in Hebrew of the divine name Yahweh. How big a deal is that? We talked with Aaron Lipkin about that earlier this week. How important a find is this curse tablet, this little lead tablet?
It is a nuclear archaeological bomb. It's an eight on the earthquake scale of archaeology. Um, I don't want to sound too exaggerating, but this is an amazing find from so many angles. It's changing the way that archaeology views the historicity of the Bible, the identification of the Israelite ethnicity. It changes the way that that scholars viewed the Israelite belief in Yahweh, and it also changes the way people see or view Mount Ebal as the site where the ceremony of the blessings and the curses in Deuteronomy 11, Deuteronomy 27, and Joshua 8 describe. We're talking about a site that basically hosts a national event, a national Israelite event. This is a ceremony that is described in Joshua, but is commanded in Deuteronomy by Moses. So when we're talking about that site, about Joshua's altar in Mount Ebal, we're talking about a nail that is sticking to the wall, two pieces of wood. One wood is the 5 books of Moses, the story of the Exodus, the wandering in the desert, the revelation at Mount Sinai, and the other stick is Joshua and the early prophets, all the way to King David and King Solomon. So this site, basically the site of Mount Ebal, unites these two pieces, and if this is the right site, if this is Joshua's altar, then it connects and proves the historicity of the two stories, the two historical stories that are bind to it.
So how does this impact the secular world's understanding of the history of Israel?
Well, I have to tell you that I'm just sharing my personal view here, and that is that when we talk about science, when we talk about mathematics, about physics, it's very objective. It's numbers, it's formulas. You can't argue with 2 and 2 is 4. You can't argue that a woman is a woman without being a biologist. There are certain things that you don't need to be a specialist to understand. This is a fact. The more we move away from the what we call the exact sciences like math and physics and go to the humanities, go to sociology, anthropology, international relations, and even archaeology, we are moving from the accurate sciences to sciences that are more affected by interpretations and are fortunately also agendas. And, until in the last 50, 60 years, the mainstream academic view in the universities and colleges basically said the Exodus never happened, Moses and Joshua never existed, the religion of the Israelites believing in Yahweh only developed later on in the year 900 or 800 BCE. So there's no way that the Bible is describing events that happened, in the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age when the Israelites are in Egypt, and all of that is because there's no evidence. Now, that's not science. I mean, the fact that you didn't find evidence doesn't mean that something didn't happen. It means that you didn't find evidence. But that shows that archaeologists and Bible scholars had an agenda, and that agenda was clearly to say that the Bible is a fairy tale, to say that God doesn't exist, that it's all a mythology, just like the Greek mythology or the Viking mythology. They're trying to make our heritage, our belief, a fairy tale. You know, the Jewish people is just about to celebrate the Passover Seder, the Passover meal, in just two weeks from now. And we're all going to sit down and commemorate the Exodus. And at the same time we're doing that, our children are going to universities all over the world and learning that the Exodus never happened. And so we're celebrating a lie. That's the problem. And so when we have a find like that, that contradicts so many of these academic assumptions, it's definitely an earthquake.
There are other inscriptions, a couple that have been found in Egypt that date to this period or even a little earlier. There's one at the temple Soleb, at Soleb in modern-day Sudan that dates to about this time, the end of the 15th century BC, maybe even a little earlier than this lead tablet from Mount Ebal. But this one found in Mount Ebal is the first one inscribed in what appears to be a Hebraic script, a Proto-Hebraic script, or Paleo-Hebrew, if you will. So what does this tell us then? I mean, that Yahweh was known to the Egyptians, certainly, either at or before the time of this inscription in Mount Ebal. What is the significance of finding the divine name in a Hebraic script at this earlier point in history?
So let's talk a bit about the other inscriptions that were found until now. The earliest inscription until Mount Ebal was the Kiafa inscription, which is basically a text describing righteousness and charity towards poor people and the needy. The name of God is not mentioned there, the name of the Lord. The most ancient place where it's described or mentioned in Hebrew writings is the Silver Scroll from Jerusalem in the year 600 BCE that has the Aaronic blessing. Which is actually a quote from the Bible. It's a quote from the book of Leviticus. So that was the most ancient inscription, Hebrew inscription that mentioned the name of God, the name of the Lord. And so now we are going back basically 600, 700 years earlier and finding the most ancient text, Hebrew text that was found. And not only is it the most ancient text, it carries the name of God, the name of the Lord. And that is a big step. And the reason why it's a big step is because, and we're already hearing attacks from the minimalists about this inscription, the use of the name Yahweh is unique to the Israelite culture. In other words, if a minimalist comes and says this is not, the fact that it's in Hebrew doesn't mean that it's Israelite. It could be Canaanite, because the Canaanite also were Semitic. They also spoke Semitic languages. So, that doesn't prove anything. But the fact that the name of the Lord is mentioned there it makes a big distinction between the Canaanites and the Israelites, because the Canaanites didn't believe in Yahweh. So this is a clear indication that the text is Israelite. And another thing that is a big revolution. Before I go to that, I just want to talk a bit more about the fact that it's using the name Yahweh. In the book of Exodus, God says to Moses, Moses says, "How am I going to present you to the Israelites?" And God says to Moses, I am who I am. But he also says, the patriarchs knew me as El Shaddai, but they did not know me as Yahweh. So you should present me as Yahweh, not just as El Shaddai. And so we understand from the Bible, this is a clear verse in the Bible. We know that this means that the name Yahweh only started from the time of Moses and Mount Sinai.
Right.
So when we are seeing that name in the inscription, it's a validation of Mount Sinai. It's a validation of the Israelites believing in Yahweh because of what's described in the Bible. And this is, I think, the biggest discovery in this whole inscription. There are many other aspects that should really be talked about and dealt with, but I think that this is probably the most important the fact.
Well, we'll be talking to Dr. Scott Stripling about this for sure. We look forward to. We had known about this discovery since the International Symposium on Archaeology and the Bible in Albuquerque last September, but we were embargoed from talking about it. We had promised not to say anything until they were ready to release it to the public, and so we've kind of been sitting on some of this knowledge. We didn't know what the inscription said until the press conference from Houston a couple of weeks ago. But it was astonishing to think that when we were in Israel a couple of years ago on the tour that you coordinated for us at the altar of Joshua, that site on Mount Ebal, that we were just a few feet, a few yards, a few meters away from where that tablet had been sitting for the last 3,400 years.
Indeed. And, I've been speaking to many other scholars here in Israel, and I'm hearing the same thing. If there's one inscription, if there's one tablet, there are more. And so, we're coming again. You guys Skywatch is coming again to Israel in March of 2023. And you're going to visit this site again. And, who knows what we will know or what we will find by then. But there's so much more to that site. There's so many findings that are still waiting to be found. And so, first of all, I invite everyone to join us in our visit of Skywatch to Israel. And they will find more information at skywatchinisrael.com. But I think that for now, we have more surprises waiting for us. I mean, I've been speaking to Gershon Galil, the professor that is right now researching and analyzing the text, together with Professor Peter from Germany, and they're repeating the same words. There's more. We can't say, but there's more. And in a few months from now, there's going to be a full report, academic report written by Scott and these two dignified professors, which is going to detail not just what we already know, but more text, more letters. It's going to shed more light on who wrote it. It's going to shed more light on the level of writing. They say that when we will see what's still not revealed, we will understand that the person who wrote it is a genius. I don't know what that means, but we will know. In any case, I'm really blessed and honored to be an integral and important part of this project. Scott and I were so frustrated that this very important Israelite site is deserted by archaeologists. And we just couldn't take it anymore. And we decided that we have to do something about it. And, we didn't excavate. We cannot excavate there at the moment for legal reasons and political reasons. But the only thing that we could do is to extract the materials from the 1980s excavation and bring them to Shavei Shomron, a township near Mount Ebal, where Scott and his crew came and wet sifted. So I had the honor of, extracting all that material to Shavei Shomron with trucks and, whatever we had with barrels and with workers. And it was a very exciting time. We felt that we were finally doing something for Joshua's altar.
And more exciting than most people realize, because that area is technically under the control of the Palestinian Authority. And so this was a bit of our Indiana Jones type moment where you basically swooped in under the radar and collected all this material that's been sitting there for 40 years out from under the noses of the Palestinian Authority. Right.
Well, we kind of updated the radar. And the radar said okay, and made sure that things will work out for us. I can't go into more details about that, but I had to pray. I had to ask for God's providence and God's help in doing this. We could have worked so hard and extracted and not find anything. Scott said that Adam Zertal did a very good job in the 1980s, dry sifting the materials. He didn't find a lot of findings. But unfortunately, if you don't wet sift it, if you don't work with a metal detector, you miss a lot of findings. So, I'm really happy that that worked out.
This story could make a really exciting action archaeology type novel or movie.
I'll be happy to be a tree in that movie.
Aaron Lipkin, lipkintours.com is his website, and of course the information for the Bible or for the Skywatch TV tour of Israel is skywatchinisrael.com. Aaron, God bless you, and we look forward to seeing you at the Prophecy Watchers Conference in Colorado Springs in May.
I'm very excited to be there. I'll be in the States from May 10th to June 30th, and if any one of our viewers, if there are any pastors or churches that would like to host me and hear more about Joshua's altar and the discovery of the Ibal inscription, I'll be happy to speak about it and to appear at your church.
Of course, Aaron Lipkin is the CEO of Lipkin Tours, and the reason that Sharon and I partner with Aaron for our tours of Israel, because he is an archaeology geek just like us. We were planning to go to Israel in July of 2020, Sharon and me, just the two of us together, so that we could set foot on the Serpent Mound of Bashan, which, give proper credit where it's due. Doug Van Dorn was the first to recognize this. You can find his description of it in his book, Giants, Sons of the Gods, which was published in 2013. We found it independently in 2019 as we were putting together our documentary of our tour of Israel, or travelogumentary, to borrow a term coined by Dr. Aaron Judkins. And in searching for information about this online, I was sure somebody had noticed it before. The only person who's ever called it what it is, which is a 3/4 of a mile long, serpent-shaped ridge, 20 to 25 feet high, 200 feet wide, and covered with about 140 megalithic tombs within sight of Mount Hermon, and 1/4 of a mile from Gilgal Rephaim. Now, if that's coincidence, then okay, I'm a coincidence theorist. But unfortunately, COVID got in the way, so we didn't get over there then. Doug, however, did with a documentary team, so there will be a documentary coming out in the fall, as we talked about in last month's Iron and Myth. So keep your eyes open for that, because we're very excited about seeing that information get out. We're not looking for credit. We just want people to recognize, hey, there's something important here, and that area north of the Sea of Galilee is real important. That's why we're going to go see it on our tour of Israel next spring, March 19th through 30th of 2023. And take the optional 3-day extension with us over to Jordan, because the view from Mount Nebo is also prophetically significant. We'll explain why that was the area below Mount Nebo, between Mount Nebo and Jericho, that Ezekiel was talking about in Ezekiel chapter 39, the end of the war of Gog and Magog. And then we'll explain when we go to Petra why Petra was historically and is prophetically significant. We think we need to do more research on it, but we think that could be the location of Mount Sinai. Not prepared to defend that yet, but we've got reasons, and we will discuss that at some future date. But come with us, and we'll be happy to share that with you. You can find out more online at skywatchinisrael.com, skywatchinisrael.com. Between now and then, some exciting changes coming for Sharon and me as far as what we do. No change as far as our relationship with Skywatch TV. I just want to say that right up front. We love Tom Horn, Joe Horn, the Horn family. They support us. They have supported us beyond anything we could have expected for the last 7 years. I will say this unreservedly. Tom Horn and Joe Horn are the best bosses I've had, human bosses anyway. Of course, we work for the ultimate boss, but they're the best men I've ever worked for in my adult life. So I want to make that very, very clear. But going forward, beginning at the end of April, Sharon and I are taking over production of our weekly video programs, Unraveling Revelation, and we are bringing back Sci Friday and resuming production on those effective the end of April. They will be distributed through the PTL network, God bless the team at Morningside. They're willing to carry the programs coming from our home, our home studio, which is actually the what I guess at one point was a sitting room or nursery off the master bedroom. So that is our high-tech, cutting-edge television studio, but it works, and that will be the site from which we will be launching those under our own banner at the end of the month. There will be an app that goes along with this, not just for mobile devices, but Roku and Apple TV as well. And View from the Bunker will be a part of this as well. So you'll soon be able to get this weekly program on your television if you've got a Roku device or an Apple TV, and it will be available for free. The app, of course. We'll also be putting our weekly audio program, the Gilbert House Fellowship, our weekly Bible study, on that app as well. So you can have that on your smartphone, tablet, or your set-top box, Roku or Apple TV. And again, that is effective in less than a month, actually. So we got a lot of graphic work to do to get the I say we, I mean, by which I mean Sharon, because she's the one who's talented, to get this launched by the end of the month. But that is the exciting thing here. But again, this is no change because I'll still be going into Skywatch TV every day to produce the 5 and 10 news updates, and you'll see me on the panel for some upcoming Skywatch TV programs. This coming week, we'll be interviewing Ryan Pitterson at Skywatch TV. Glad that he'll be coming in and recording some programs for Skywatch TV. So, this is all being done with the blessing of the Horn family, and we cannot say how deeply we appreciate their love and friendship and support in all of this. And as we go forward, we will continue to support the work that they do at Whispering Ponies Ranch, which is so important in working with kids who are at high risk of being trafficked, abused, and perpetuating this cycle of evil that continues generation to generation. Through their work with Royal Family Kids, the Horn family and Whispering Ponies Ranch is working to change the lives of even just a few. And we think of no better ministry, no better charity for your donations than Whispering Ponies Ranch. So that's the exciting news. We'll keep you posted as we get closer to that event. Again, lots of logistical stuff on the back end to get that done, because we got lots of content to upload and share through that app. I think they'll be surprised. They may want to renegotiate their deal, the company that's hosting the app and producing it for us. So we'll let them discover that on their own. We got some conferences to tell you about coming up just about 6 weeks away. The Prophecy Watchers Homeward Bound Conference. That's May 19th through 22nd. Let me back up first, because the Skywatch TV Defender Conference, the virtual conference, launches online May 13th and will be available online for 90 days. Ryan Pitterson will be contributing to that, as will our friend Dr. Doug Petrovich, author of the book Origins of the Hebrews and the World's Oldest Alphabet. Of course, Tom Horn, working on a presentation about the transhumanism movement, something he's been talking about for a long, long time. I will be presenting on the connection between Mount Hermon and the Mount of Olives. Why did Jesus pay so much attention to those two mountains during his ministry? It's not overt in the text, other than we know that he spent a lot of time in the Mount of Olives because he had friends there, Lazarus, Mary, Martha, and so on. But why? Why did so many significant events, especially the last week of his life on earth, the last week prior to the crucifixion and resurrection, on the Mount of Olives? It has to do with, that's a big part of my book, The Second Coming of Saturn. Anyway, you can find out more online at defenderconference.com. The complete list of speakers is there. And if you register by April 15th, actually through April 15th, you get a $10 discount. Normally it's $95. It will be $85 through April 15th. The Prophecy Watchers Conference is a live and in-person conference at the Colorado Springs Marriott, where Prophecy Watchers has had their conferences in the past, pre-COVID. We look forward to getting back there and seeing our friends again, like Gary Stearman, Bob Ulrich, Mondo Gonzalez, a new friend. They are the men behind Prophecy Watchers, but speakers include L.A. Marzulli, Ryan Pitterson, Dr. Randall Price, get to talk some archaeology with him. Aaron Lipkin will be traveling over from Israel and will be speaking at the conference. We look forward to seeing Aaron and his wife Eddie there at the conference. Bill Salas, Brandon Holthouse, Brent Miller Jr. and Sr., maybe just Brent Miller Jr. I thought Brent Miller Sr. was on the list earlier. I'm not seeing him on the new material, but Doug Woodward will be speaking at this conference as well. So this will be a great gathering. May 19th through 22nd, $85 registration online, prophecywatchers.com, prophecywatchers.com. Southwest Radio Church is holding a number of regional conferences around the country this year, and we're going to be speaking at the one that I think is at the coolest location of them all. That's the Ark Encounter. Southwest Radio Ministries hosting at the Ark Encounter, July 7th through 9th of 2022. Sharon and I will be speaking along with Pastor Larry Spargimino and others. So this one, just $29.99. If you're in the vicinity, just south of Cincinnati, Ohio, please come and join us. If you've not seen the replica of the Ark, built to scale, I mean 1-to-1 scale, you don't realize how big that boat actually was. It will be an amazing conference. Then later in July, the Go Therefore Conference, the Harvest Revival Center in Brookville, Ohio. That's just outside Dayton. Pastor Mike Spalding will be there, along with a number of good friends of ours. Pastor Carl Gallups, Dr. Michael Lake, David Hevner, Casper McLeod, Coach Dave Daubenmeyer. Kenny C. will be speaking. We're so looking forward to seeing his presentation. Tom Dunn will be there, and you don't want to miss this. The Go Therefore Conference online, gothereforeconference.com, gothereforeconference.com. Now, we talked about the Israel tour. We're also going to Turkey this fall. This will be a small gathering. We're thinking a small tour, maybe 24 people at most. But boy, the sights we're going to see, the cities of the churches of Revelation. Göbekli Tepe, the world's oldest religious community, more than 10,000 years old, according to the standard dating of the archaeologists. Abraham's home city, Haran, the Asclepion of Pergamum. This was a healing site that was dedicated to the demigod Asclepius. He was a healer, which is interesting because scholars still believe that the meaning of the root word behind Rephaim in Hebrew is healer. You don't see any evidence in the extra biblical references to the Rephaim to them healing anything. But the point is, there is a definite connection between the demigods of the Greeks and the Rephaim of the Hebrews. So we will talk about that. The underground city of Derinkuyu, Çatalhöyük, an ancient city more than 9,000 years old, where all of the home entrances, all of the openings to get into the homes were on the roof. No doors. Why? Megalithic idols, Mount Nemrut. This will be an amazing thing, and will be accompanied by Doug Hershey, the founder of Ezra Adventures, the tour company, but he's also the author of the best-selling books Israel Rising and Jerusalem Rising. Look them up on Amazon. They are fantastic, and we'll be there in Turkey from October 18th through November 3rd. If you want more information, go online to skywatchinturkey.com, skywatchinturkey.com, and we hope we can see you there, because this is going to be absolutely fantastic. Thank you for taking some time out of your schedule to watch or listen, as the case may be. And if you get a spare moment, we'd appreciate a review at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, or wherever you find us, which is wherever fine podcasts are sold. Our announcer is D.C. Good. And A View from the Bunker is a production of Gilbert House, released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. We do this because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.